welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, and London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful March the 10th, 2020. Rondo Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, it's been a mixed bag of tricks today, up and down. You know, I was listening to your president this morning, and he said that the coronavirus is no big deal as we're shutting down schools and, you know, parts of communities in America. And then all of a sudden, I had my daughter, invite me out to dinner.
Yeah.
You know, in one of her trick plays, I knew that's what it was. So we go out to dinner, and then all of a sudden she tells me she's going on spring breaks with a couple of her friends.
Yeah.
But they need to take my Escalade because it got more room in it. So I've been blindsided by 2 people today.
You can't get blindsided, especially when it comes to spring break. It's all fair and love and warm. I want to say Big C Sports is powered by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic from 3,000 miles away, and he'll do his thing, and I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Really appreciate the way things are going. So, Big C, did you say that your daughter invited you out to dinner, or did she ask you to be a chaperone to spring break, Big C? Your thoughts?
No, she invited me out to dinner. Her and her friends are headed down to Florida for spring break, but they needed a vehicle with some size, so I got suckered in on a halfway free meal. I know she used my card to pay for it, and now I got to pay for this trip down to Florida.
Well, it's all fair and love and war. I also want to wish my daughter happy birthday, Eve. It's great to have daughters and people that we can admire and wish them the very best in life. You know, I love so much about what we're doing with Big C Sports. I just want to make sure that we give out this Veterans Crisis Line. And, you know, everybody seems to be in crisis mode nowadays. I spent most of my day listening to Richard Pryor. Every time I had a spare moment, he really makes me laugh about things. But if you're going through some issues, that Veterans Crisis Line is there to help. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you're online, just go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and you can get some help. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Well, Charlton, it's always important that we recognize our great veterans of this country, Charlton, that have served in our armed forces. But unfortunately, just like the troubled time we're going through in America, everyone is concerned about this coronavirus. These veterans go through these concerns every day, Charlton. Many of these veterans are homeless. And they're on the battle lines with this coronavirus because they don't have health care. They don't have where they can go get tested. Like many Americans, Charlton, they were told that, you know, test kits would be available. And yet you're being turned down if you're trying to get a coronavirus test, Charlton, by medical services because they don't have the ability or the testing kits. Just like with our veterans, they don't have the ability to make the phone call to many of them to the suicide prevention hotline. And I know you talk about going online, Charlton, but if they don't have access to a phone line, they definitely are not going to have access to a computer, just like as the government is telling people to go online and see what they can do to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Instead of telling us, they're telling us to self-educate ourselves about this coronavirus, just like they're telling veterans, you know, to self-medicate and self-mental service themselves about getting help. You know, we're losing some 19 a day to this horrific disease, and the government is going to have to find a way to help out our veterans, just like they're going to have to find a way to help out our private citizens during this coronavirus epidemic. They
really have to find a way. We all got to do our best. They're there to help veterans and their loved ones. Big C, 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you're online, go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's Veterans Crisis Line. That net and get some help. I guess a lot like calling 911. Oftentimes when you call 911, it may not be the person that's in peril, but it might be someone that can give them some help. Really looking forward to making sure people get that message. Also very excited about launching a real estate TV show in the spring of 2020, having great conversation about that. The goal is simply to recruit 100 real estate brokers to put their property listings on TV, and that makes them more of a superstar. Think about e-commerce. If your average real estate sale price or listing price is $500,000, you get 100 brokers, each listing 2 properties. That's $1 million. That's $100 million in listings. That's possible because of the power of TV, a lot more than door knocking. So really looking forward to bringing that to fruition. Big C, I was telling you something. I spent a lot of time, especially in my spare time, listening to Richard Pryor, the late Richard Pryor. And it's amazing that as I get older in life and a little bit more wise and less wet behind the ears, Big C, that man, not only was he funny, but he was so real. Yeah, he had a potty mouth, Big C. He just spoke the real, he had real talk. But there's so many things that I think about that Richard Pryor told us about. The older I get and the more I read, I realize how brilliant he was, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, the brilliance of Richard Pryor, the late Richard Pryor, Charlton, was talking about real life affairs. I mean, it's so many times in life, just like when the president speaks about coronavirus, not being knowledgeable about what he's speaking about and just talking off the cuff and saying that everything is great and the disease is not a problem, even though we're getting more and more Americans, detected with it every day. And this is the reason why the government doesn't want to make tests available in abundance. Richard Pryor spoke about real life, and everybody that he talked to could identify with the things that he was lamenting on, because these things have happened in our lives. And so when somebody could tell you and put a comic spin on it, it would make you smile because you would reminisce.
Yeah, it made me smile. It made me realize it's okay to laugh. I know some of the things that people go through in life, when we see a lot of it on the news, sometimes we forget to laugh. And laughter really is a good medicine, as well as washing our hands. Nothing wrong with that either. I want to just get into a little bit of the world of NBA basketball. You know how rumors get started. Well, word is that KD, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving are a toxic combination, that they played a role in the firing of the Kenny Atkinson, the Nets, and they possess the number 7 spot in the East, Big C. So there's always going to be some type of love-hate relationship with media or how rumors get started. But Kevin Durant, I don't think he had any problems with Golden State other than he just wanted to play basketball. So whether he's a problem or not, I know Kyrie Irving, that kind of follows him around, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when players are, against the coach and about the lineups that he is pursuing to keep a team in the hunt, and neither one of those players are playing. KD is not going to play all year long. Kyrie Irving is out of the lineup with shoulder surgery. And matter of fact, the Nets had a better record with Kyrie Irving out of the lineup than what they did in the lineup. But as his coach has him in the 7th seed in the playoff hunt in the Eastern Division, it's always strange that you get rid of a coach during the season, especially when he's in the playoff hunt.
Yeah. Well, it's all fair in love and war. And as even the great Richard Pryor said, when you have a position of power, you can do what you want to do with that power. So players don't get coaches fired. The person writing the check to the coach is the one that does the firing. We know Magic Johnson had those stocks when he came into the league playing for the LA Lakers. But think about this. If you want to just balance out life, you can get fired when you have a winning record. There's some coaches in the NBA that's happened to. Mark Jackson, Golden State Warriors, Vinny Del Negro for the Clippers, Dwayne Casey for the Toronto Raptors. Remember that Avery Johnson for the Mavericks, Tom Thibodeau for the Chicago Bulls, Mike Brown, Cleveland Cavaliers, the great George Karl for the Denver Nuggets, Big C. Each of these NBA coaches, would you believe they were fired after winning more than 50 games, Big C? Your thoughts?
And that's how fickle sports is, Charlton. You think that you hire coaches to win games. And all of those coaches that you just spoke about had 50-plus win seasons. Yep. Even Casey had won 62 games, Charlton, and that wasn't enough to keep his job with the Toronto Raptors. But all of those coaches win over 50 games in their final season of coaching those franchises that you spoke about, and they lose the job. But, going back to the Nets situation, when you look at Irving and Durant, players make more than coaches do. And it's easier to move on from a coach than it is from a player. If you have enough disgruntledness in an organization. When Magic Johnson was with the Lakers, they had just won a championship.
Yeah.
But there was a rift between Paul Westhead, Magic Johnson, and Norm Nixon. Magic wanted to be the solo point guard. Norm Nixon was an all-pro point guard prior to drafting Magic Johnson.
Right.
So the team moved off from Westhead and Nixon at the same time after coming off of a championship season.
Isn't that amazing? And you know how people talk about the best coaches in the universe? And a lot of people over the last 5 years, they've been seeing how great of a coach the great Steve Kerr is for the Golden State Warriors. They have the worst record now in the NBA. Has he forgotten anything about coaching? Or is it the players that he had to help him become the best NBA coach in the universe? A lot of those guys will have a lot of Band-Aids on them right now. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, they have a skeleton of a lineup in Golden State. You have to understand, Golden State knew once this season started that they weren't going to potentially have a chance to challenge for the West in the division. And then when Steph Curry went down, they knew they didn't even have a chance to challenge for the playoffs.
Yeah.
So at that point, what it became was a revolving door of setting up different rosters, Charlton, setting up lineups to see who could mesh in the type of system that you wanted to play in Golden State.
Yeah.
And so this was a wash season for the Golden State Warriors. Basically, all they were doing was seeing which players that they could have in their lineup next year that would match up with the superstars they were going to have coming back.
And that's amazing how no one, and again, we were just talking about it, coaches that were fired after 50-plus win season. So Mark Jackson, he had a 50-plus win season when he was released by the Golden State Warriors. For Coach Kerr, who doesn't even have 20 wins. But it's amazing how when Jackson was released, he had Curry, he had Thompson. They were building something that was really strong, but they moved to the side. I was hearing some of the talk from the inside is that he was too much fire and brimstone about religion, and Coach Kerr came in with a different type of, a different type of mentality, Big C. But losing is always okay if you've had success behind you. Allegedly. So let me just say, if things don't get better for Golden State, hypothetically, we all think they're going to be back in the power structure of the NBA. But at what point would it take for Golden State to say, you know what, we've been looking at your face too long, Steve Kerr, just like relationships, Big C. Does he have any type of pressure if they don't get back to maybe being one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the league next year, Big C? Your thoughts?
No, Steve Kerr has clout, and the Golden State Warriors will be back where they're supposed to be next season, Charlton, once they have a healthy lineup. And like I said, that Giannis will also end up there with the Golden State.
Really?
Because he wants to win championships and be part of a dynasty in the NBA. When you have the firepower that the Warriors have offensively and the type of breakneck basketball that they play, it makes it difficult for teams to keep pace with them, Charlton, because their offense is their defense.
Yeah.
And when you can run and gun like the Splash Brothers can in Golden State, Steve Kerr, when he leaves Golden State, it will be on his own call.
Yeah.
Not management saying it's time to go.
You know, there's talk about Coach Pop. You know, you can stay someplace too long. There are times when people sit around your restaurants and they've already paid for the meal. Sometimes you ask them if they can leave for the other guests waiting around the block, because you might even give them a free cookie or a libation to walk out of the door. There's some talk that maybe Coach Pop, that has made a home and a lifestyle in San Antonio down near the Riverwalk, that he, of course, may be someone in the talks of going to New Jersey. Why would you want to leave San Antonio to live in New Jersey, Big C, where it's more expensive to live, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, you know, you can always have talk about certain type of players, Charlton, but does the New Jersey Nets fit the type of style that he coaches, Charlton? Coaches like Pop, who've been around over 20 years, is not going to change up their coaching style, Charlton, to go to another organization. And you have to have the players that fit what you do.
Yeah.
And when you look at New Jersey, Charlton, especially the 2 figureheads that everyone talk about in Durant and Irving, I don't think either one of those guys fit the style of basketball that he coaches, because he never pursued either one of them while he was in San Antonio and things were on a high. He had an opportunity as a coach, general manager, to go out and try to sway those players to come play for him.
Yeah.
Because they are in New Jersey and they've never done any better than where they are, a 6 or 7 seed in the playoffs, I don't know how the coach is going to make a difference if you don't have the playing power.
Isn't it amazing, as great a coach as Coach Pop is, 20 years and the 20-plus years making the NBA playoffs, which is a very difficult thing to do. There's a couple of teams that haven't made the playoffs in a decade, Big C. You know, he did have the great Kawhi Leonard, and Kawhi Leonard decided to leave. Not necessarily because of Pop, but he didn't stay because of Pop. So if Pop did go to New Jersey, they don't fit the style. What's the appeal? He's won everything you can really win. It may just be where he's happy where he is, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, you spend 20 years in an organization, Charlton, you're not unhappy.
Yeah.
Think about that in the NBA.
That's true.
Mean, it's a league that, you know, it's like the NFL. It's not for long if you're not producing.
Yeah.
He has produced. He has 5 titles. He has a legacy. You know, the talk with Pop going to New Jersey is just like the same talk with Tom Brady leaving New England.
Yeah.
And if you think about Tom Brady leaving New England, going to another organization, Tom Brady was the 27th ranked quarterback in the NFL last year.
Yeah.
Tom Brady is no longer a superstar. He's a superstar in New England, but he's damaged goods if he was to go to another organization.
Yeah.
He is not bringing the same system that he had in New England. So all this hype and talk about Tom Brady going someplace and all of a sudden instantly he's going to make them a Super Bowl contender, that's not true, because he's not bringing the New England organization. He's bringing Tom Brady.
Yeah.
And the players that are in a pro team already, Charlton, you can't intimidate those guys. You can't go out and intimidate 40 of the 53 players on a roster saying, if you don't do things my way, you're going to be gone.
Yeah.
There's a collective bargaining agreement in place that doesn't allow for that.
Yeah, it's a lot like Richard Pryor, the late Richard Pryor. He was talking about having the chance to date a Playboy bunny back in the day when the great Hugh Hefner was around, Big C. He thought it was all green on the other side of the fence, but that woman had a lot of problems, Big C. Richard Pryor is very funny, but I think a lot of coaches, too, it may look like it's greener on the other side of the fence, but that's not always the case. I want to look at tonight's Big C's NBA lineup for Tuesday, March the 10th. Boston is at Indiana. That's a big game underway in the Eastern Conference. Also, the New York Knicks at Washington. Cleveland will be at Chicago. Minnesota will be at Houston. They've been having a lot of problems lately getting those Rockets to lift off, Big C. What's the problem? Your thoughts?
I don't think it's a problem, Charlton. I mean, when you look at what goes on throughout an NBA season, every team goes through a stretch where they lose a few games. I mean, the Milwaukee Bucks got the best record in the NBA, and they've lost 3 consecutive games. Is there a panic in Milwaukee?
That's right.
No.
It's
just what you go through at a certain time of the season. Everybody is fighting for playoff position. So when you lose a few games, the Rockets are going to be in the playoffs. Why burn yourself out now?
Yeah.
Whoever you have to play in the first round, they have to play you. So the team with the best legs and the best shots is going to win that. It's not about the color or the name that's across the front of the jersey.
Yeah, that's very well true. It's about load management for some players, too. Even sometimes injuries do get in the way for Giannis. Orlando at Memphis. Dallas will be at San Antonio. Just finished talking about the great Pop. So there's a big showdown in Texas tonight. Also, Phoenix will be at Portland up in the Northwest. The L.A. Clippers are at Golden State up in Northern California. Beautiful Chase Center. Also, Brooklyn is at Los Angeles playing the Lakers, a team that's really, they come off of a high of knocking off Milwaukee and then knocking off the L.A. Clippers. They got to make sure they stay intact with a team that has some turmoil coming in from the East Coast. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, this is the grinding time of the year. We got less than 20 games to go in the NBA season. And 1 or 2 games, if you're already in playoff bracketing, generally doesn't make a difference. You just have to make sure you play at least 500 ball the rest of the way.
You got to find a way to get the ball in the hoop. I want to get through Big C's NBA power rankings coming up here on the beautiful March the 10th, 2020. I'm going to count down from 10 to 1, and you can do your thing, Big C, as the Mystic. Coming in number 10, the great Boston Celtics, Big C. Johnny Moyes, the Boston Celtics, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this is a team that hasn't lived up to all of what's expected of them in the East. You know, they go on a hot streak and they go on a cold streak. But this is a team that has to be healthy come playoff time. Kemba Walker and Jason Tatum are going to have to step up big.
Yeah, they really have it going in Boston. They've had a little bit of hitch in their giddy-up as of late, but they're still a dominant team. Indiana Pacers, just talked about them playing tonight. Coming in at Big C's number 9, Big C, your thoughts?
You know, they're my sleeper team in the East. The Pacers fly under the radar, being there in the Midwest, Charlton. This is a team on any given night can knock it down. You know, when you look at Sabonis, he's one of the 3 players in the league that you really have to worry about on the front court. He's second behind, Giannis in double-doubles in the East, far as big men goes. And so, and this is a team that can sneak up on you and knock you off.
They really can't sneak up on you. You can't sneak up on anybody unless you climb that mountain about a mile high. Number 8, Big C's top 10. The Denver Nuggets, Big C, your thoughts?
As everyone talks about the two teams in L.A. and the West, you cannot forget about Denver. They're not the sexy team that everybody wants to talk about, but they have a solid lineup that when they get hot, Charlton, they can beat any team in the West.
And it's also a mile high, so you got to have your lungs under you. Sometimes, wherever there is, before you see lightning, you also hear thunder, or you see the thunder, you hear the thunder, see the lightning. I know thunder and lightning go together. Do they have it lightning down in Oklahoma City with the thunder, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, they do, Charlton. They got the big men that can control the paint, and you got Chris Paul, a new type of leader that they haven't had in OKC, an unselfish distributor of the basketball, and this team has played a lot better than what everybody expected. They're the third best team in the West, in my opinion.
Isn't it amazing? They just needed someone to do what Don Coryell said back in the day, pass it, and he's doing his thing, Paul, passing the ball for the OKC Thunder. When it gets hot or when it gets cold, you want the heat. The Miami Heat, this is a team that at times, it just depends on their attitude. They look like they could be Eastern Conference champions. Other times they'll have an upset, Big C. Your thought?
Well, this is a team that's still finding itself. Jimmy Butler came over and brought a new mindset. You got to look where Jimmy Butler's gone in the last couple of years. Teams have got better. The Chicago Bulls were better. The Minnesota Timberwolves were better. The Philadelphia 76ers are better. Now the Miami Heat. Wherever he goes, people gravitate to him and upgrade their basketball.
Yeah, and that they're doing. It's a puzzle that's coming together. I really want to see how they put it together. Back in the days in the 1980s, the number one TV series in the universe was called Dallas. And the theme, one of the most highest rated TV shows, was Who Shot JR? And that was in Dallas. Now they want to know, can Luka Doncic get higher ratings than the movie Dallas? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you think about where the Mavericks are with Doncic and Porzingis, Charlton, this is a team that is creeping up on everybody. Luka Doncic right now may be in the top 4 players in the NBA. He's second in triple-doubles in the league, Charlton. He's about 4th in scoring. And this is a guy that's gotten better each of his 2 years in the NBA. And now that Porzingis is healthy, and once these guys get totally enmeshed, Charlton, you can't overlook them in the West.
They might overtake Who Shot JR. The ratings were high back in the 80s. We'll see what happens with the Mavericks as they advance to the playoffs. A number 4 spot, the defending NBA world champion Toronto Raptors. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the sleeping dog of the East. A lot of people have overlooked the champs, Charlton. But as you look at them, as they've gotten better as the season has gone long, they're a solid seed in the East Division at number 2. Don't overlook them when the playoffs start.
You cannot overlook them. The Milwaukee Bucks, right now, they have a little bit of a hitch in the giddy-up, especially with Giannis. But they are coming in at number 3. And when they are healthy, you got to look out for those Bucks. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, teams are starting to learn how to defend Giannis. You got to gang up on him. You're asking the other shooters on Milwaukee to come through. They got a lot of big men in the lineup, Charlton, but they don't have a lot of shooters that they had last year. And I think that may bother them as the playoffs go on.
Sometimes my eyes, like Richard Pryor says, his eyes might deceive him at times in some of the funny ways he would tell it. But the LA Lakers just came off of beating 2 of the top teams in the NBA at home. But Big C has the Lakers coming in at number 2 down at Staples Center. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I have them coming off at number 2, Charlton, because they don't have a second point guard on that roster that they can count on. They don't have anybody other than LeBron in the fourth quarter they can count on. Anthony Davis has been sluggish all year. He ranks 60th in the NBA amongst starters in fourth quarter scoring, so you can't count on him. They have to find another guy that they can count on. Yes, they had a big series over the weekend, but that was just the weekend.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, it's all fair in love and war, and Scarface called it politics. Speaking of politics in L.A., the L.A. Clippers are coming in as Big C's number 1 team in the NBA Power Rankings. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this is a team that's beat the Lakers 2 out of the 3 times that they've played them. And if you look at the last game that they played when LeBron James was covering Kawhi Leonard, he was 6 or 7 from the floor against LeBron James. I look at the Clippers as being the youngest team in L.A. going to have the freshest legs. They've used a lot of load management. They've picked up some key players. They have depth at every position. They go 10-man deep in the rotation, and that's really going to help them come playoff time. And you have to show me that you can beat them 4 games in a season, Charles.
4 games in a season, and especially if you're going in best 4 out of 7. So that's Big C's Power 10 NBA style on a beautiful March the 10th, 2020. I want to just juxtapose the Big C Power rankings. Former WNBA General Manager Penny Toler, she filed a lawsuit against the WNBA team. The former Los Angeles Sparks General Manager Penny Toler, she's suing the WNBA team, saying that she was fired, Big C. You know, we just talked about coaches that were fired, especially over there in New Jersey. But she was fired for raising complaints about inappropriate sexual relationships involved with a team president and a managing partner, not for using a racial slur, which is what they tried to say. Is it really on? We don't know the answer, but sometimes there's so much that goes on in real life. The way the great Richard Pryor told us, there's real talk of there's people that play games like they're perfect. But here's a woman that maybe told some things that were going on. You know, adult people do what they want to do, and they wanted to get her out of there, but it come back to bite them anyway. Give me your thoughts on everybody's having something going on in their personal lives. It just seems that way following sports over the years. There's no Pollyannish people anywhere, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, trying to deal with the underlying currents of a lawsuit without knowing all the crux and the nuances of it is hard to comment on. And this is a situation that, you know, when you file lawsuits, that's all privileged information that I haven't had a chance to see. Yeah,
I just wanted to put it out there because we're always pro-advocate for women. And then it seemed like she was just talking about something going on in someone's private life, and that may have cost her. She had been with the franchise as a player or GM since it was first founded in 1997, and talked about the soap opera-like atmosphere. We know the Me Too movement, a lot of women going through a lot of issues. I always say let the judge decide what happens. Never want to just take someone and say that they're not credible, but I know anyone can be accused of anything. It doesn't mean that is real. I do want to say, before we take the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout, there's so much happening in the world with sports teams and deciding what they're going to do with tournaments or with games that are going to be played. And I just want to make sure that we're on top of that as well. I love giving my 2 cents about that. We'll talk more about that in the second half as we come back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. The apps that I really love are by Google and Alexa. Just give it a try. Say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic from 3,000 miles away, and he will do his thing, and I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Really appreciate that. Also, excited launching our real estate listing show in the spring of 2020. The goal is simply to get 100 real estate brokers that want to list their properties on TV. Imagine getting average listing price $500,000. You get 100 brokers to list 2 properties that month. That's $100 million in real estate listings. Looking forward to bringing that to TV. You don't get that by door knocking. Really excited about that. I told you there's some things going on in sports. You know, I'm here in Northern California, and I love being prescient, Big C. I love reading about things that oftentimes we'll see in the news within a week's time. San Jose Sharks, NHL determining plans for home games after a crowd ban. San Jose, California, really is the largest city in Northern California, bigger than San Francisco. The Sharks and the NHL, National Hockey League, they're still determining, Big C, how to proceed with 3 scheduled games in San Jose, California this month, following a local ban that's placed on gatherings of more than 1,000 people in response to the spread of the coronavirus. That's by Santa Clara County public officials. Big C, this thing it's everywhere, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this has become a nationwide thing that's going on, Charlton. They're not new to what's going on across the country. We've had school districts shut down across the country. I know you talked about the Sacramento area out there where you are, school district shutting down. The city of Atlanta shut down its school district today, Charlton. You think about the city of Atlanta, one of the largest cities in America.
Yeah.
And the largest airport, the busiest airport in the world in that city.
Yeah.
And so we've seen that up in the Northeast where the Ivy League has closed all their campuses. Think about it. The Ivy League,
yeah,
the most, highly academic conference in America, has closed all their campuses and canceled all of their basketball games.
Isn't that amazing? I know a lot of times people want to keep their head in the sand until something happens to them, but I love being a part of that PSA that I think is so important, Big C, not just to come on and talk about who won a game. And as you mentioned, the Ivy League, how they're canceled, spring football too, and there are other conferences that are not canceling anything. I guess they got to listen to the medical doctors and have people talk about that before they go ahead and cancel everything. But even also, we hear about the heat is a little bit more difficult for that virus. According to POTUS, when it's hot, the virus goes away. That has nothing to do with science telling me that, but that's what POTUS said. We have this draft coming up in a couple of months. It's going to be the NFL draft in Vegas. But the second presumptive positive test came out in Clark County, which is where Nevada, a case of coronavirus with a woman in her 70s. And they're, hospital isolation. That's where they're holding the Pac-12 tournament for NCAA basketball, Big C. I know they're talking about the NFL draft coming up, later this year also. So Las Vegas, Nevada, it really is a haven for what they say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, not necessarily so. I want to get your thoughts because I know you travel quite a bit too. There's so many hotels in Las Vegas. There's so many things in Las Vegas that are considered legal in Las Vegas that are not legal elsewhere. So not only is it hurting the gaming community, Big C, there are a lot of world-class hotels. They entertain people from all over the world. And I know there's a lot of travel restrictions like in Italy and also China. But how does Las Vegas deal with this when it's the mecca and the playground for adult people, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, the West Coast Athletic Conference has their championship in Vegas, as well as the Mountain West and the Pac-12. So when you think about Vegas being one of the busiest transit cities in the United States, and it is built on the travel industry, Charlton, that's what the gaming is all about.
Yeah.
How will it affect Las Vegas once this comes up, Charlton? They're going to have to take a deep look into it.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the amount of people that flow in and out of the city on a few day at a time basis,
yeah,
it's really going to hurt, the traffic and the economics of that city.
Yeah, I know, and I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I listen to my doctor and I get updates from my doctor. And of course, when you have school districts closed in Northern California, really thank Gavin Newsom for that. I know also Cuomo over in New York were doing some things too to keep people safe, Big C, or at least aware. Down in Florida, where a lot of things have happened in Florida, people love going to the Sunshine State. And I know you're a big golfer, Big C. The PGA, Sawgrass is going forward in Florida, and they're telling golfers to use their own ink pens to sign autographs. I don't know what using your own ink pen has to do with keeping people safe. The virus, if it's in the air, I have heard some thoughts from Jay Monahan, the PGA Tour Commissioner. If they're telling people that we think there's an issue going on, and that comes from the public service, Big C, and doctors, and science, then why would you want someone signing your autograph anyway if you're a fan? Does that make any sense, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, this is going to be one of those situations, Charlton, where you're really going to have to access the public's access to the players as well as the media. I know the NBA and the NHL, Major League Baseball, is talking about banning reporters from the locker room.
Yeah.
Because why do you want to bring more outside contamination into a place that potentially can, harvest a virus? So
yeah.
When you talk about fans and players interacting, Charlton, this is going to be something that's going to be a very tedious subject to deal with. It's always been talked about fans having less access to players and players not wanting to interact with fans.
Yeah.
Now it's becoming a medical mandate that this doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I know golf is considered a gentleman's sport, but you really don't come in contact with anybody because a lot of people are behind the ropes unless it's just players shaking hands. The Players' Championship, commonly known simply as the Players Stabilized, is actually stylized by the PGA Tour as the Players' Championship, an annual golf tournament on the PGA Tour, originally known as the Tournament Players' Championship. It began in 1974. And the hugest prize is about $12.5 million back in 2019 and offers a $12 million purse. Usually has about 50, the top 50 players included in the rankings throughout the world. Now, it's one thing to get ready for this tournament. And golf is great. But the Masters is down there in your neck of the woods. That's down in Augusta, Georgia. And I know it's a good old boys club. It really is probably outside of Pebble Beach in California. It's one of the most pristine golf courses that I've seen, Big C. But I want to get your thoughts. And this may be just a test run going into the Masters. There's no way in the universe that they would ever cancel a Masters tournament. Big C, your thoughts?
No, they're not going to cancel the Masters, Charlton. I mean, they've closed down the Atlantic School District, and that's not too far away from Augusta. But I don't think the Masters will close down, Charlton, because of the amount of revenue that's involved in that event, Charlton. But the problem with the Masters is that it's a worldwide event. People come from all over the world to attend that as spectators. So that's something that they're really going to have to look at in a very serious way. And, we're talking about a month away for that to occur, and we don't know where this epidemic is going to go in a month's time, Charlton. But that's something that the CDC, which is based out of Atlanta, is going to have to keep a very close eye on, Charlton, is the attendance of the Masters and how this disease spreads in the southern states.
Yeah, I know even when you have, in politics included, you have Joe Biden and then Bernie Sanders, they were counseling, going out and stomping and shaking people's hand as they're looking for votes.
Think about this, Charlton. Here's the president saying today that he didn't consider this disease to be serious.
No.
Why hasn't he had a rally since this epidemic has broken out in the U.S.? He was having them every week like lunch.
Yeah.
But since this coronavirus has broken out in the U.S., the president hasn't had one rally since then. So he's saying it's not serious, but he's not willing to take himself out in public.
I would still wonder, how he was searching for President Obama's, birth certificate, that racist mantra that he kept producing out there through the hate speech and trying to get some of the knucklehead good old boys to maybe do something harmful. And the Obamas received a lot of, death threats based on that vitriol that POTUS stirred up. It would be great for a man that had 5 deferments and even ran away from a press conference. He left Mike Pence, vice president, to explain things to the American people, and he doesn't know anything other than having science. I'd rather hear from a doctor, not Mike Pence. But at the same time, wouldn't POTUS have the same type of, I guess, the desire to find out President Obama's birth certificate? Why doesn't he take a public test and let the whole country see that he's healthy or is he not healthy for not only coronavirus but many other things, as he once bragged about how healthy he was? Why not put the country at ease, Big C, and be the commander-in-chief and let the whole world see that you're trying to get rid of Obamacare and health care? You say you have your own plan. Why not take a test for the whole world to see the same way he pursued President Obama's birth certificate? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you have to have sensibility and human empathy. And he doesn't have empathy, Charlton, for Americans' public. As you look at the president and how he is, he's afraid to go out in public now and have those rallies that he was having on a weekly basis prior to the coronavirus breaking out. He puts Mike Pence up as a spokesperson. You have the Secretary of Health, and he won't let the Secretary of Health speak. He won't let anybody of health knowledge speak to the United States public. Why? You're sworn to tell the truth in your oath as a doctor, Charlton.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't want doctors speaking about this disease, Charlton. He lets the vice president, because the vice president is his stooper. And so he can lie to the American public like the president has lied, but I would rather have the Surgeon General giving me an explanation of what's going on. He's a doctor, okay? He's a certified doctor. He's actually the highest doctor in the United States because he is the Surgeon General.
Yeah.
But we're not getting voice from him. He's going to be honest with the American public. And the president is silencing anybody who contradicts what he's saying about this disease is no big deal.
That is amazing, because you just mentioned that the Surgeon General would be the one you would think that we would be able to hear from. So let me get your thoughts on again. And we're not bashing the president. We're just saying things that you can Google.
I'm bashing him because he's lying.
Yeah. What advice would you give, even for someone like a Mike Pence? Why not him?
Well, you think about Mike Pence. Mike Pence is telling people to go online and find out. Why in the hell do you have to go out and self-educate yourself about a world epidemic? Why can't you just be told by these officials? Aren't you knowledgeable enough? If you're sitting up there talking on the mic, giving daily press conferences, you should be able to advise the American public to what they need to do. This should be on every news outlet every day. The government should be giving information for every news outlet to pass out, especially Fox, to its listeners, because they're being stupefied by saying that there's no big deal about this because the president says there's no big deal.
Yeah.
And so this is what's wrong. You're telling everybody to go online and educate themselves medically. Everyone doesn't have a computer, just like when we talk about our veterans of America, everyone doesn't have a computer.
Yeah.
And then you're asking someone to translate medical language, Charlton, as a layman person, to translate medical terminology and apply that to yourself and your family.
Yeah, everyone, just in case they don't know, the current U.S. Surgeon General is Jerome Adams, African-American. He took office in September 5th of 2017, and he reports to the Assistant Secretary for Health, but they keep giving us Mike Pence, as Mike Pence has already in the past shown that he really didn't have much concern for people dealing with issues. I, again, just ask people to stay in touch with your medical professionals and make sure you know what's going on, especially mentioning school closures from California to the East Coast and in all places in between. It really is something that we all got to stay in touch with, Big C. I wanna just bounce the ball a little bit to the world of basketball. And, we did a show just recently as we talked about some of the greatest basketball players of all time, whether it's college or pro, but the great Bill Russell, Jerry Lucas, Artis Gilmore, Dr. Kermit Washington, Big C. Those are some big names that come up, but also you think about guys like Bill Russell, San Francisco. You have Jerry Lucas from Ohio State, the great Artis Gilmore, Jackson State, Julius Erving, known as Dr. J, Massachusetts, and Kermit Washington. Think about this, Big C. There's so many great players, and it's amazing how no matter what we do with March Madness or NBA, those names still stand out as some of the best players in the universe. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you name those players that you named, as far as when you talk about the greatest players in college basketball history, I think so many people get enamored with a highlight show that they've seen on TV.
Yeah.
But the players that you just named, Charlton, they're in such a rarefied fraternity in college basketball that only 5 of them exist. An entire starting lineup of these 5 players, Charlton, who all went on to play in the NBA and win championships in the NBA also, Charlton.
Yeah.
These are the only 5 players in college basketball history to average 20 points and 20 rebounds a game throughout their college career. Now, you think about how difficult that is to pull down 20 rebounds in a night.
Yep.
But these 5 players, Charlton, averaged that in their college career. Bill Russell in San Francisco, where he won multiple titles. Jerry Lucas at Ohio State, where he won multiple titles. Artis Gilmore played at Jackson State, did not win a title. Julius Erving at UMass did not win a title. And Kermit Washington at American University did not win a title, Charlton. But they all won NBA titles, and they all, throughout their collegiate career, averaged over 20 points a game and 20-plus rebounds a game. The only 5 men in college basketball history to ever accomplish that.
Well, those are all a great feats, but I'm telling you, no one accomplished more as far as points per game than the great Pete Maravich, Big C, from the LSU, them Tigers down south. Think about him. Also, I think he was like 44 points a game. You have Freeman Williams, Portland State, the great Oscar Robertson, the Big O from Cincinnati, none other than the inimitable Elvin Hayes, Big C, out of Houston, Larry Bird, Indiana State, Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, UCLA, Hersey Hawkins, Bradley, the great Danny Manning out of Kansas, Tyler Hasbro, North Carolina, the great Calvin Murphy out of Niagara. There was Harry Kelly, out of Texas Southern, Alfonso Ford, Mississippi Valley State, and Lionel Simmons out of LaSalle University. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you talk about the greatest college basketball players of all time, we started with a list of 5 that are in the most exclusive club in college basketball history, the 2020 Club, Charlton, for their entire career. This list that you've gone through, Charlton, you're talking about the most elite scorers in their careers in college basketball history.
Yeah.
Not only the most elite scorers, but players who also won championships. You talk about Pete Maravich, the leading scorer all time in college basketball.
He was amazing.
Followed by Lionel Simmons out of Loyola Marymount, number 2. You think about the kid out of Portland State, Freeman Williams, Charlton. These are the top 3 scorers in college basketball history. Yeah. And it came from a large swath of the country, from down south in Louisiana to up to Chicago and out to Portland. So when we think about college basketball, knowing the history of the game and what it means, you have to know the players who created the game, not the players that you see on the highlight shows on TV or are having a tremendous NBA career thinking that they were great basketball players. Their games evolved once they got to the NBA.
Yep.
But the guys who made March Madness what it is, making the Final Four what it is, Charlton, you went through a list of players who made college basketball memorable for decades.
Yeah, and you can believe it, I think University of Oklahoma is talking about erecting this football statue for that good old boy that plays for the Cleveland Browns of Baker Mayfield. That you have to have a lot more going on than that, I would think. That's just my opinion. Also,
well, that's what they do. They have a monument park, Charlton, of all their past Heisman Trophy winners.
Yeah.
And they've had 2 of the last 3 Heisman Trophy winners in Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray. Next year, Kyler Murray will get a statue in that park. And that goes on about what you do in college, just like we talked about the greatest basketball players in college basketball history, not about their pro careers, but what they do in college. And that's what Baker Mayfield did. He lifted the Oklahoma Sooners to heights. He won a Heisman Trophy. And so he deservedly should go into that Monument Park there at the Sooner Stadium.
Wish him nothing but the best. You know how we give out our Veterans Crisis Hotline? Their experience in helping veterans and their families. We tell them the number 800-772-8255. I want to just bring this up. It's a side note, Big C. Mental illness, it can potentially affect thousands of college athletes. We know the coronavirus was with campuses closing down and telling students that they have to test online now. A lot of high schools have had their Disneyland trips canceled from Northern California and Southern California too. Health is always more important than going out to an amusement park. But the top of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Washington, D.C. is approximately 185 feet above the surface of the Potomac River. In December 1st, 2018, Anthony Lamb, he contemplated jumping off of it. I know a lot of people have that same issue with the Golden Gate Bridge. And his Vermont basketball team, think about this, his Vermont basketball teammates had a 2-day break, the second and third final game of the tournament in the area of the ideal time, and it led to a dangerous, frenzied moment. That Saturday evening, Lamb slipped out of the team's hotel onto the D.C. night, and he wandered to the top of the nearby historic bridge. And I just want to get your thoughts, if you're familiar with what happened there, Big C, your thoughts.
Well, Charlton, I mean, this is something that goes untalked about. We talk about mental illness in this country, and a lot of people think of it as an embarrassment to their family. People are always talking about institutionalizing someone when they suffer from mental illness, and we don't know who it's going to afflict.
We don't know. Yeah.
Just like when we talk about our Veterans Crisis Hotline every day and losing some 19 veterans a day to suicide. And I also speak highly of our young people in America, our adolescents, who are going through those same mental afflictions, Charlton. And here it is, you're looking at Anthony Lamb. This is a scholarship athlete at a major university in Vermont, Charlton, contemplating suicide. And we think of college athletes having everything, free education, Charlton, an opportunity to potentially play professional ball, to get a college degree.
Yeah.
But we don't know the demons that are in everyday life in everyday Americans, what people go through, what their upbringing brought them through. And we think that because we see athletes that they're strong and invincible. And here it is. I'm so proud of Anthony Lamb bringing this to the spotlight.
Yeah.
Because this is like the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton. These are the things that can help save lives.
Yeah.
Until people come out of the closet about what's affecting them, then the rest of America thinks that they are alone. But when there are high-profile athletes come out and address the world about the vulnerability that possesses them in life, Charlton, then other people can say, hey, I'm not alone. And that's what we need in America, to stop putting embarrassment and shame on people who suffer through a mental illness and try to find a way to help them.
And
Kevin, try to find a way to get them through this, Charlton, to talk them off of that ledge like Anthony Lamb, to know that there's greater heights that they can achieve in life. They just need somebody to talk to. And for him to bring his story to the public spotlight is a great American PSA, Charlton.
It really is. Also, Kevin Love, remember NBA with the Kevin Love with the Cleveland Cavaliers, he came out and started talking about some depression that he was going through. A lot of players have stepped up to say it. That's why I like doing it, for every show, giving out that national hotline, because sometimes people need help. And it may not be a person per se, but it could help somebody that we care about or love. And that's the great thing about teammates. They tend to do that. We talked about some of the closings of the crowds being told you can't come in and be around athletes. As an athlete, you got to wonder, if it's not safe enough for the crowd or the reporters to come into the locker room, why am I here around the teammates? A virus is a virus, Big C. Well, I just hope that people can, listen to the medical doctors, and I would rather learn more what the Surgeon General has to say more than the Vice President or the President. I want to just close out on this story because in Santa Clara County, up here in the Bay Area, this is the Santa Clara County health officials, Big C. They're telling people to stay away from crowds of over 1,000 people. That's why it's affecting San Jose State Sharks. The San Jose Sharks. Also, some events, San Jose State in Stanford and Santa Clara as well in the South Bay. The 2019 college football attendance, it hit a 24-year low according to the NCAA's official numbers, and the FBS average of 41,477 per game is the lowest since 1996. That's also the fourth lowest average nationally since 1982, even though a lot of stadiums in the South have added 100,000 seats, Big C. The SEC, they have an average attendance of 70,000 plus through 14 teams. The Big Ten, 65,000 plus through 14 teams. The Big 12, 57,000 plus through 10 teams. The ACC, 48,000 plus through 14 teams. The Pac-12, 46,000 plus through 12 teams. And the lowest attendance is the MAC, the Mid-American Conference, 15,000 plus through 12 teams. I wonder with this coronavirus outbreak, I'm hoping that it can get solved through medical science, but I'm just waiting for information from the Surgeon General like everybody else does. But I wonder if it's going to affect it and be even lower this year. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, the first concern with college football, Charlton, is spring games. Now the spring ball is broken out, and if universities are closing down and canceling classes, you've had several out there on the West Coast as well as in the East, Charlton, where they've canceled basketball and school attendance. Are they going to cancel spring ball? And I would think that that's first and foremost. You talked about campuses having online education given out right now, Charlton.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a direct line to canceling spring ball in a lot of these places that really potentially may affect attendance. And we don't know when this coronavirus is going away. I know your president says when it gets warm, it's going to disappear because it's no big deal.
Yeah.
But he's a medical expert from what I checked last time. He has his doctorate in medicine, so he can tell the country how they should look at everything. But, sports is secondary when it comes to health in America.
Yeah,
and
really
so
is.
as we talk about attendance, we talk about fans and all of that, Charlton, you need to look at your health first before going to try to look at some athletes while you're sitting in an arena or a stadium.
Yeah, I was watching a couple of events today, and I saw how some of the stadiums didn't have very many people at all. It's just a matter of how we get on top of it as a country. I know that our medical community and scientific community would do its best to make that happen. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. The apps that I really love are by Google and Alexa. Just give it a try. Say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic from 3,000 miles away, and he will do his thing, and I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Amazon TV. There's a lot of smart TVs all over. The universe really appreciate that, launching our real estate listing show in the spring of 2020. And the goal is simply to get 100 real estate brokers that want to list their properties on television, and hopefully that'll give them the chance to have more exposure, and they'll have more success doing what they're trying to do in the world of sports. So I'm always looking forward to that. I know we talked about tournaments for the Pac-12. The West Coast tournament's having their tournament tonight, Big C. I know even down south in the SEC tournament, it's kind of up for grabs. There's so many teams that are competing for the SEC tournament, whether you look at teams like an Auburn that got through and surprised a lot of people last year. There's always, you got to pay attention to Kentucky because they're always in the thick of things. And you got LSU, Mississippi State also. They don't play until the quarterfinals on Friday. Your thoughts, Big C?
Well, I mean, all college basketball tournaments are up for grabs. It's about hitting the shot at the end. I saw BYU get knocked off, Charlton. They had a 14-game winning streak, and they lost at the buzzer on a three-point shot. So it doesn't matter who you are when it gets to the tournament. It's about who has the hot hand that night.
It's about who has the hot hand that night. Also, the Pac-12 tournament, we know it's about being safe. They're going for it with it anyway. Pac-12 tournament starts Wednesday under the bright lights of Las Vegas, Nevada. A lot of chaos, crowd-wise, and also for the teams. Oregon, it's still a wide-open tournament, but Oregon coach Dana Altman, they hope to have at least 7 NCAA teams in March Madness. Coronavirus aside, the show is still going on for a lot of schools. It's amazing how you're canceling class and you won't let students go to a class. They got to do it online, but you'll get players on an airplane unless they're all taking a car or a bus and fly them into Las Vegas, and they'll play a tournament because $1 billion is a lot to it's a lot to not make, Big C, collectively $1 billion. So what is it about Pac-12, West Coast Conference, SEC, and then Ivy League saying no to certain things? I just want to know why some parts of the country seem to be more inclined to listen to the medical doctors and others are listening to the TV contracts. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, isn't the Ivy League all academic institutions, Charlton?
Yep, that's
true.
Well,
when you look at it in totality, the NCAA came out today and said that March Madness is going to go on. They're not going to cancel any events. So teams that have automatic qualifiers, Charlton, to get into the tournaments, they're already in. Those at-large bids will come down depending on how schools rank, Charlton, of getting in.
Yeah.
So the March Madness is going to continue. It's about money, and it's going to continue. That's what makes America go on. The country is not shut down because it's all about money. This is a country of e-commerce.
Yeah.
Athletics is e-commerce, Charlton. It's about getting people moving and spending dollars.
Yeah. We
have a country that's built on people spending, whether it's in a restaurant, whether it's in a hotel, whether it's on an airline. This is not a country of productivity, as a lot of people want to think that America used to be the largest industrial nation in the world.
Yeah.
This is a country that's based on services and spending your money on services.
Yeah, and sports we know it's a $1 billion industry, and that boys and girls sports is the foundation to that $1 billion industry. I love doing Big C Sports. We could talk about sports, we could talk about politics, but I know sports brings people together, and sometimes if you got to watch a sports event to get updated on what's going on with science, I hope that people can take advantage of that and really do what they can to stay safe. I really love the way things are going with our medical industry, being out there more and not just behind the scenes. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, as we've talked about, a lot of tournaments going on in Vegas, and it being the most visited city in the United States, we're 44 days away from the NFL draft that's going to be held in Las Vegas. We're a week away from NFL free agency.
We're a week away from NFL free agency, and you know what? It's amazing how much money is going to be either lost or made depending on what medical science does, but I love bringing that to the universe. You can always follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports, and as we always tell you, there's never, ever any excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911. because no man or woman should ever have to deal with that garbage of their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports Show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.